Hello friends, welcome to Edwiki Learning channel. Please do subscribe to get more updates on the DevOps concepts. This video is part of the full course AWS DevOps Practitioner training. Please do check the description below to get the link for the complete full course. Without further delay, let's get into the video. Thank you.
Welcome back team, and we will be continuing the Docker container concepts, right? So by now you all familiarized that our goal is to run our application inside a container, not directly on the EC2 instances itself, right? And we have already discussed enough in terms of the benefits or the advantages that we are going to get when you run a application inside a container, and we will be doing further more enhancements or improvements in the way how I'm running the application inside a container. Okay, so it's gonna be a little more interesting today, and I'll take you towards some of the Docker concepts today, guys. And just to give you one other note again, yes, the Docker concepts that we are going to discuss now and the Kubernetes concepts that will be followed up start from tomorrow. These are the two topics that is going to give a weightage on your resume, guys. Okay, the remaining all is okay, but the Kubernetes is the one which is the topmost expected skill at the moment. Okay, and I'm just putting that note so that you guys will understand the importance of these concepts. Okay, well, altogether now our goal is what now, guys? Okay, our goal is to run the application inside a container by following all the best practices that I wanted to. Are we good with this statement? Right? At least for next 10 days, our goal is to run the application inside a container by following all the best practices. When I say best practices, my application which is running inside a container should be highly available, should be scalable, should be highly secured, right? Should be accessible to the end user, whoever is accessing from the public internet space. All these things I need to ensure again, because we already know how these best practices can be applied if the application running on the server directly, right? But now the things are changing, right? The same strategy will not work directly as the application inside a container. So we need to do little more changes to achieve those things again. Okay. So as part of that, now let me go ahead and start, you know, deploying one application inside a container. I have one EC2 instance that is currently running here, and I'm just using this instance. Possibly, I'll say this is the build server, just to understand. I'm just trying to do some build operations on this EC2 instance, just to, you know, build our custom container images that I wanted to, right? Good. So let me logging into the instance. This is where I logged in. Let me see the current status, guys. Systemctl status Docker. The Docker daemon is currently running. Give me a second. Well, the Docker daemon is currently running. I'm just verifying the stuff, guys. Docker images. I can see there is one image. Docker PS. There is one container currently in running state. Let me do a simple cleanup. Right. Let me stop this container. Let me remove the container. I think I will remove the images as well. Right. It's all done. So there are few Docker commands that you should be get familiarized with, and here are the Docker commands that you wanted to I meant to say you should be get familiarized with. So I'll be sharing these Docker commands even bit later in the chart as well, but you can see them in the course tracker as well. I'll share the links later. So so these are the different Docker commands that we should be familiar, and all of them are I'm actually using as part of my implementation, and I will be explaining what each command is doing. Good. Now, whenever you wanted to run a application inside a container, the very first thing that you need to do is go to the Docker Hub registry, correct? Go to the Docker Hub registry and search for the image, right? Which image is the right pick, correct? So just go to the export tab and search for the images, right? So I think in last lecture, I have shown you that the HTTPD image, right? The HTTPD image is going to or is carrying the HTTPD application plus minimal OS plus dependencies, which is a very generic app server or the Apache web server. And once you get it, you are actually creating your own customized container images by adding your code base in it, right? That's how it worked on. So how many of you happy with this HTTPD image, guys? In the sense, the default HTTPD image that I'm getting in from the Docker Hub registry, this image is actually bringing a Alpine minimal OS, correct? Maybe for some reason you are not happy with this Alpine minimal OS, got me? Right? Maybe you don't like this Alpine minimal OS for whatever the reason. Maybe the commands are different. Maybe the way how the OS works will be different, right? Obviously. Maybe you wanted to have a Amazon Linux operating system to run your application as an example, right? So then I should not use the default image that is provided by the Docker Hub people to run my application, right? So now if I that means what? I wanted to have a Apache HTTP web server to be running inside a container, but the minimal OS that I wanted to use inside my container should be Amazon Linux. That is my requirement. Getting me, guys? Hope you are following me, right? But if you take this HTTPD, the one which is by default provided to you by the Docker people, you are getting Alpine minimal OS. No, I don't like that. The second thing, even in the last lecture, I have shown you that once you shell into a container, then you realize that the VA command, maybe the netstat command or few other commands are not working. Why? The default minimal OS that you get it from this image is giving you only minimal stuff, whatever is needed to run the application, not beyond that. That is where you may need to do a little more customization, right? Let's say, hey, I need the V8 to be available inside a container as well. Sometimes I may need to use it. I may need to use the netstat command to see some of the port status or any other for that matter, right? So that means what? You should be capable to install certain packages, right, inside. I mean to say the application specific minimal OS, right? Now the question for you guys, maybe I'll try to open the paint, right? So basically, when you create a container, right? So let's say you have the image somewhere in the Docker Hub registries, right? From the Docker Hub registry, you actually pulling the image and you are running the container, right? Now, let's say this is your container and this is where your application is running. Okay. So let's say you are in a container, right? Some of the commands are not working for whatever the reason, but you need those commands in order to make it working or in order to do some troubleshooting, let's say, right? So what is your preference, guys? Will you try to install them on the container because you already there in the shell? Got me? The way how you log into the EC2 instances and run the commands to install the packages in previous methods. Now also I logged into my container, right? Do you prefer to customize your container based on the requirement that you have? I'm talking about the actual application container where it is running in. I mean to say, whatever the customization that you wanted to do for your container, my goal is always to include them in my image itself, correct? My goal is always the customization has to be included in the image. Okay, so let's say I have the image here that is got pulled in. Okay, if you take the image and create a container out of it, now if you go inside a container and run some commands to make your container customized, right? Then later on, let's say for some reason this container got crashed, this container got deleted for whatever the reason, right? Whenever you are recreating a container by using this image, then all the changes that you have done inside a container, those changes will go away, correct? Because the commands that you have executed inside a container to make it little more customized as per the requirement, those are not available in the image, right? So the next time when you create a container, right, from the image, you will not see all of these changes that you have made. Let me know, guys, if you are having any audio issues. Thank you. Right. So that means always your thought process should be like this. Any customization that you are trying to do for your application, you should add those to a image only, right? So probably if you are doing something on the container for any reason, right, you should be creating a custom container image out of the changes and put it back to your Docker Hub registry, correct? Then later, for any reason, if my container get crashed, stopped, or I mean to say deleted, then those customizations are already there in your image itself. The next time when you recreate a container using this image, you'll get to see all of them, correct? That means what? Always my goal is how effectively I can build a custom container image which is carrying everything whatever is needed. Tomorrow, if you think that no, I need one more change, don't install it in the container which is running currently. If you do so, try to create a one more image out of it and keep it ready. If that is the case, how difficult it is, guys, to run the commands inside a container where my application is currently running. Each time when you do some changes to the container, you create an image again, put it into your Docker Hub. Difficult, right? Hence the reason, the way how you are building the Docker image, right? The way how you are building the Docker image with your own customization should be simplified, not the way how I did it yesterday. Yesterday I have shown you one method how to create images by yourself. Yesterday I actually created a container with the default image. I copied my customized code in it. Then I created a one more image out of it. Then I deleted my container. Then my image is there in the Docker Hub that I can use later, right? That is not an effective way, guys, which we can use it in real time. So to create a custom container images, right? So let me show you the process. So my presentation should be somewhere. Right now, let me talk about this. So you take a build server. Again, I'm repeating the statement that here my goal is to prepare my custom container images, whereas the image is carrying everything whatever you needed as per your project standards. Okay, I'll take a build server where I wanted to do a Docker build process, right? And in this build server, currently I have a code that you get it from the developer, right? So we'll talk about how you get a code, right? How the developer will give you the code, all those things later. For now, yes, I have one code file in the build server, right? And now this code I wanted to deploy and run it in a a dev, QA, perf, and production. That is our goal, right? As part of that, let me go with the build process. So in the build server, right, I have the Docker engine that is installed, which is running currently. Then I need to go and take the image from the Docker Hub. If you take a default HTTP image, as I said, the HTTP server and the dependency packages, all these things will come in, right? Why the Tomcat is coming there? Give me a second, guys. Sorry for the inconvenience. I'm just doing the changes. And of course, I keep on doing the or modifying my presentations, right, as per the latest discussion that I wanted to. Right, it's all dynamic content. Well, so, right. So when you create a container out of this image, right, so we see that the Apache and the dependency, minimal OS, all the dependency packages, everything is came in, right? What I did later time, I copied my code into the container, right? Then I run the Docker commit command that will create a new image. That image you publish to Docker Hub. Then you will get the new image in the Docker Hub that includes your code as well. But can I use the statement like this rather me using the terminology called code? The new image that is created is containing all the customizations that you wanted to have in your image. Can I use the statement? When I say customizations, it can be copying a code, it could be installing a package, it could be any other for that matter, right? So tomorrow, based on your requirement, it can be anything. You do the changes, put it back to your Docker Hub, right? Then your new image has everything, whatever you wanted to, right? Now, whenever you wanted to deploy this application in your target environment, right? Just matter of taking that image and deploy and run it as a application. But this is the build process, which is a little complicated. Now, I wanted to simplify this process, right? So you see this. The way how I wanted to customize my application, all those steps, I'm going to put it into a file called a Docker file. Docker file is called as a the Docker file is called as a configuration file, how you are expecting the new image has to be created. In the Docker file, you need to keep all the instructions by following the Docker file syntax, right? Instructions in the sense, right? You define the statements in the Docker file saying that, hey, you please take a image from the Docker Hub registry, which is the default image. Then you please copy my code. You please install these packages that I wanted to. Then this is the service that I wanted to start automatically when the image is being deployed later to run as a container or any other customization. So pretty much in the Docker file, you define all the statements how you are expecting the new container image has to be created. When you are keeping your instructions in a Docker file format, right, it's very easy for us to go and execute the Docker file. When you execute the Docker file, as part of the execution process, it will take care of doing the whole exercise in order to create a new image, and the new image you just publish to your Docker Hub and then use it whenever you wanted to deploy it into the target environment. What I'm doing here, the manual method that I have followed, like creating a container in the build server, doing the customization in the builds in the container, creating a new image, that whole effort I'm I'm transforming it into a automation model by adding a Docker file here. Are we good with this? And most of the concepts I'm repeating by intention, guys, because this is a little tricky to understand sometimes. So I'm hoping you will pick it up when I'm repeating some of the statements. Okay. So now I wanted to have my own custom container image, right? So then I'm going to create a Docker file for that. Obviously, when you are writing something in a file, right, by following certain syntaxes, right, then it's a good idea to use the Visual Studio Code as a editor to start composing your file and prepare the things, right? Because the because the editor is helping you to get some color coding and any syntax related issues, auto suggestions, that meaning, correct? So I think now what I do is I'll go and create one other folder where I wanted to keep my Docker related development, just to make the things cleaner. I think I'll create one folder here, maybe a container folder. Maybe I'll say container code or config, maybe code. Anything is fine, whatever the name that you call it as. Now let me open that folder. It can be any location that you like it, right? Okay. So I just have created my folder. I open the folder there. Now you create a file here. The file name is Docker file. So this is the default file name that you need to use, and always the D should be uppercase, and this is a single wording Docker file. Then you see that the Visual Studio Code identified that this is a Docker file, and you can see the corresponding Docker logo is appeared automatically. Now in this Docker file, you need to start writing a kind of a scripting, right? The instructions that you wanted to give to create a custom container image. Now the next thing is we need to see the syntax that you need to follow to write a Docker file, correct? So go to the documentation now. So if you get into the docker.com, you will be getting the documentation there to see how the Docker file works and how to write a syntax in the Docker file to create your own custom container images. The Docker file has a concept called layers, okay? And here you can see the multiple layers or maybe instructions: add, arg, cmd, copy, so on, so on, so on, so on. So you need to be familiarized with these instructions, what the each instruction is doing, how to use these instructions in your Docker file, right? So I'll go one by one of these, whichever is more relevant for us at this time. Okay. So now a question for you at this time. Can I create my own custom container image by myself without me taking a default image from Docker Hub? Not really, right? So first you take the image from the Docker Hub, which is giving you some minimal stuff, right? Then on top of that existing image that you pull from the Docker Hub, you add your own changes, correct? Even yesterday as well, I did the same. I took the HTTPD image from the Docker Hub registry, then I created a container out of it, then I have added my changes, then create a new image out of it, correct? So that means even now to write your instructions in the Docker file, the very first thing that I need to tell that which is the default base image that it has to pull from the Docker Hub registry. So from is the instruction that you need to use. This instruction is all about telling the base image that it has to pull from the Docker Hub registry. So all what you need to do is take this from, probably if you click on from, you will get some syntaxes. The syntax says that from, then the image that you wanted to pull in. right? Just go there, write a syntax here, from space, then specify the image that you wanted to pull. Let's say in my case, I wanted to pull HTTPD image, correct? I'm done my line number 1. Hit enter. So this line will tell that, hey, pull the image called HTTPD from the Docker Hub registry. Why it is Docker Hub registry, guys? Because if you don't tell the image has to be pulled from where, automatically it will be pulled from the Docker Hub only. If you want to specify explicitly, you can tell that, hey, pull it from docker.io and specify slash. If you want to pull it from the specific user account in the docker.io, then you need to specify your Docker Hub username as well. I think in my case, the account is DPT Hub. Let's say if you wanted to pull it from your specific account, then the syntax will be like this, DPT Hub / something like that, right? But for now, I just wanted to pull the default one. I'm just saying from HTTPD, right? So as of now, I'm pulling from the Docker Hub, which is the public repository, which is not required any credentials, right, to pull it. So when you run docker pull command, is it expecting the credentials if you pull it from the public repository? No. If it is a private repository, we'll definitely talk about that later, how we can do that when I move to the next concepts. For now, this is the publicly available image, no credentials, no password will be required to pull or to download. I just say that from HTTPD, right? Now hit enter. The second step is what? So I'm just replicating the yesterday's behavior. My second step is the copy operation, correct? Once you get this HTTPD image, then I need to copy my code into the specific location where it's supposed to be, correct? That's my customization. To copy the files inside a image, to create a new image out of it, right? The operation is a copy operation. You get into the documentation to see the different layers or instructions that the Docker file is supporting. We have already used the from statement. Now, if you see somewhere, there will be a copy, which will be copying the files or the directories. Go to there, look for the syntax and specify the source location where the file is there, the destination where it is, then add the syntax. So copy, and I wanted to copy from my project working directory, right? Probably I'll specify the file as well. Maybe I have the file called index.html in my project working directory. That file I wanted to copy to my target. Where do I need to copy the file, guys? What is the location? The target where my index.html file is supposed to be. In this case, I'm taking the HTTPD is the default base image, right? This image documentation explains that what should be the location where the file is supposed to be, correct? The file supposed to be in the /usr/local/apache2/ht docs, correct? How do I know that? I'll just go to the HTTPD image documentation because I'm using that image as a base. Then look into the image documentation and it will tell you the location. Sorry, it will give you the base location or the root folder where the file supposed to be, the code supposed to be. And of course, you see some examples as well here. Then copy that and specify the location there. Right? So I think I'm done, correct? I'm done with my code. If at all you have Docker installed in your local machine, in your laptop, then you can take the terminal here itself and can run the command, guys, correct? So you can just take the terminal here only, right? If at all the Docker is installed in your local machine, you just run the Docker commands. That will take care of executing this code. I mean to say executing this Docker file, and it will follow the instructions and it will create a new image out of it. But in my case, since I don't have the Docker installed in my local machine, what I do is I'll try to run this from my EC2 instance, which I configured as a build server, right? So I'll just go to the build server now. This is my EC2 server. So here I'm going to create a, where I am, no files, right? So here I'm going to create a Docker file and keep the code over there, save it. Let me see my file content. So I'm saying that take the HTTP image and copy the index.html file from the present working directory to this location, right? So you ensure that this file is available in your present working directory. This is the code. So let me create a file. This is my code. Now, if you look into your present working directory, I have a Docker file which has the instructions how my image has to be created, and the index.html file, which is my customization or the files that I wanted to be available in the new image. Now you go and execute the Docker file. Docker build is the command to build a Docker file and create a new image out of it. Before I go and run the Docker build, I'll show you the current status, guys. If you do Docker images, there are no images currently, right? If you do Docker ps-a, there are no containers also. This is like a clean slate. Now let me try to create a new image. Docker build -t to give the tag, that means the name of the image. What should be the naming convention, guys, of your image? If you wanted to, of course, when you create a new image, definitely you will be publishing or pushing the image to your registry accounts, right? For the reason you are building the images. So it will be like the registry name, correct? It will be like your registry name and the registry username, then the image. Let's say this is HDPD custom image. I'm just putting some name for that. Since I'm building this very first time, I'll give the version as 1.0. The version or the tag both are same, space, and give dot. The dot refers that the Docker file is available in the present working directory. That means I'm telling that, hey, the Docker file is the file has the syntax. The file is available in the present working directory. That is what is it mean by the dot. The Docker build command by default now looking into the PWD to see is there any file called Docker file. If it is, it will go and execute the Docker file line by line for you. Let me see what will happen if I run this build command. If you see this build command, guys, right, somewhere you can see, you see this 1/2. That means what? So there are total 2 instructions that you given in the Docker file. Out of the 2 instructions, it is now executing the first instruction. The first instruction is actually a from statement. From means what? It has to download a image from the Docker Hub registry, right? It is actually downloading the image because the HTTP image is not already exist, right? So it is downloading. Now if you see the second step, 2/2, now it is executing the second layer, right? Which is actually a copy operation. It is actually copying this file to this specific location, and then it is actually exporting to images. That means it is creating a new image out of it. Now finally the image is ready. Now if you do Docker images and your image is ready, guys, you see dpt hub / httpd -custom with the tag 1.0, the image is ready. Now this image has your customization, whatever you have been expected. You see, so that's how it works. Are we good with this now? A simple process how to create your own customization. Now you publish this image, you do a Docker push and push this image to your Docker registries and use it later whenever you wanted to, right? But now this image is containing your code as well. Because I made a customization, I told that in my Docker file itself how the new image has to be created. The only difference now is the yesterday I was using the Docker commit command. Today I'm using the Docker build command. The Docker commit command will be creating an image out of the running container. The Docker build command will be creating a new image based on the Docker file instructions. So if you create a new customized container images using the Docker file, it is more flexible. You don't need to worry about creating a container, do the customization inside a container, create an image out of it, destroy the container. You don't need to do all of this, right? Just put your expectations in the Docker file, execute the Docker file, it will take care of everything for you and it will create a new image out of it. During the image creation process, right, when you are executing the Docker file, if it need to create any containers as a temporary, right, it will do it automatically by itself. You got me? It will create a containers automatically. It will destroy the containers automatically. It will create an image for you. All these things will be happening behind the screen. We don't need to worry about doing all these things. That is what is the significant improvements that we can get it by adding your instructions in the Docker file itself and execute a Docker file. Yes. So when you run the Docker build command, right, it will create a container in the backend and it will use that to create a new image out of it, but that is all transparent for you. It will take care of in the backend. If it thinks it needed a container as a temporary, it will be doing. I think we'll be checking all those things when I improvise my Docker file further. Let me clear the screen. Right, yes, so like yesterday, we don't need to create a container, add the images, sorry, do the customization to the container, then run Docker commit command. All these things are now eliminated. We're not following that process. We just put your instructions in the Docker file, just do a Docker build command, it will be taken care of. Now let's see how it works. Now the second improvement that I'm doing, right, maybe I'm not happy with this HTTP image because this image is carrying the Alpine Linux. Maybe I don't want the Alpine Linux to be in my application. I want the Amazon Linux to be. Okay. So what I do is I will go to the Docker Hub registry. I'll try to find a image that is providing me Amazon Linux operating system. Because the default HTTPD is not giving me a Amazon Linux. It is giving the Alpine Linux, which I don't like it. Let's say I need a Amazon Linux. Search for your favorite OS that you wanted to. Then you will definitely see a image that is providing you a minimal OS. When you are using the operating system itself as the image name like this, then that is giving you only the minimal OS, guys. You will not get any of the top-up predefined software stack. Like you will not get a Apache HTTPD here. You will get only the minimal OS, right? So let me try to use this Amazon Linux now. First of all, let me try to run this. Okay, Docker pull. I'm just trying to pull the Amazon Linux image. At the time of you are representing or specifying the image name there, if you don't specify the image version, by default it is appending :latest. That means it is going to download a image having the version as :latest. So if you look into the Docker Hub registry under the tag section here, all the images must be having a tag called latest. So that will be picked up by default if you don't specify any version. If you want to specify the version, you can specify the version whatever you like it here. You see here, you want Amazon Linux 2023, you specify 2023 here. If you want Amazon Linux 2, you specify this particular tag, something like this. So which version of Amazon Linux you are expecting to be available, you can specify that by looking into the tag section and mention that. If you don't, it will take the latest by default. Now come back here. So I have the Amazon Linux image with me, right? Help me guys, can I run a container out of it? I got the image, right? Can I run the container out of it? Let's say Docker run the container name, let's say test container, run as a detaching mode in the sense backend, right? Now let's say this is the image that I wanted to run. Let me try hit enter. Now let me see my container status. You see that I just have tried running a container using this Amazon Linux, but the container is actually exited immediately the moment when the container is created. It is not in the running state. Why do so? Because I'm using the Amazon Linux image, which is just a minimal OS, right? And we already know that, or we discussed that if a container has to be in a running state, obviously there should be a process running inside. That means an application should be running inside a container. Then only the container will be in running state, or else no. Here, I'm just taking Amazon Linux. It does not have any application in it. Obviously, there is nothing to run, and the container got exited. Make sense? I just wanted to show you that if there is no application running, then your container will be it will be get executed. That's what it is. So previously, when you use HTTPD, right, why it was running continuously? Because the HTTP image was created in such a way that the Apache web server has to be running automatically whenever someone is running the container out of it. Make sense? Now let me do this cleanup, guys. I don't want all these test cases. So I'll just
I have one question, sir.
yes, please.
Yeah, so yeah, I understand that nothing is running. That's why the Amazon Linux it started and immediately got exited within 2-3 seconds. But let's say we are monitoring let's say the memory or something, like say top command or something, right? So if we try to run that command, so there will be a continuous process that will be running inside that Amazon Linux. So in that case, will it not run continuously? Let's
Not
say
really.
we run a top command.
Not really.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Let me
something
try
is
to.
running, right?
Yeah. I'll try to get to there. Okay. I'm doing the improvements now. Okay. When you say something is running, we'll see what it is running. Okay, and how that will be. For now, just to make a few more improvements, right? I don't want the HTTP image, so I want the Amazon Linux. Correct? Good. Now, when you use Amazon Linux as a base OS, and you know that this image will not run just like that, right? Now you need to do your own customization. What is the first customization that I wanted to do on this, guys? Probably you need to install the Apache HTTPD web server, correct? Because that is not coming as part of the Amazon Linux image. So if you want to install certain packages in your base image, then you need to see what is the corresponding syntax. Getting to the Docker file and see the syntax here, and there will be a syntax called run. Run is the statement which will be executing the commands to install or to make anything happen to your customization. In my case, let me go to the next line. I'll use run statement. What is that I wanted to run, guys? I wanted to run a command called yum install, let's say yum install httpd-y, correct? So this is the command that I'm expecting it to be running on this default base image so that my httpd will be get installed. Are we good with this? Like that, you can run a multiple run statements and start installing the packages, whatever the packages that you are expecting it to be available in your base image. I meant to say in your new image that you are going to create, right? So you don't need to do any sudo and all. So it will just run by default with the required root, but the sudo would be needed at certain cases. We'll see those scenarios. Right now, let's say I will do yum install vi. Maybe I wanted to install the vi editor just in case, just to see how it works. Okay, so any other packages that you wanted to install, guys? Let's say yum install. Maybe I'll go with a command called mkdir. Let's say mkdir /logs, right? So when you're using a run statement, it need not to be a m command. It can be any OS command that you wanted to run. Those commands will be get executed and the new image will be created out of it. That's what I'm trying to say. When you are expecting the multiple commands to be get executed to do your customization using the run statement, we can do all this like this, or rather me keeping the run statement multiple times, you can keep one time and put that right, the ampersand. That means there are multiple commands that needs to be get executed as part of the single run statement. We can do this also. It's up to you which you follow, but this is more convenience method or best practice to avoid multiple run statements within your Docker file. But always, how do I know these syntaxes, right? So we need to refer to the documentation to see the run command, how it works, right? When you are giving the when you are giving multiple commands, what will be the instruction? We need to see all those things. I'm just trying to cross check the syntax that I am using. You see, so run and the command, and you see that the two ampersands there. Yeah, that looks good. Now, what will be the next step, guys? Maybe when you are writing the Docker file like this, right? When you are giving this Docker file to your colleague, maybe someone else is using the Docker file, right? They wanted to know who has written the Docker file sometimes, right? It's better to add one other instruction saying that the maintainer is the instruction which is like just giving the developer name, like whoever is writing this Docker file, right? The developer's name can be written there. That way, if someone else is using this Docker file in your team, they will know that this file is written by so and so. If they have any questions as well, they will come and reach out, whatever it is. That is just a informational kind of the instruction that we can add to the Docker files. Let me come back to here. Okay, so the copy operation is the one to copy the files. Let me do copy. And in the present working directory, I have the index.html file that I wanted to copy. Now this time, to where I wanted to copy this, guys. I wanted to copy this file to which location? Of course, the file has to be copied to a target, but what will be the target location? What will be the folder where it has to be, right? So it should be under where www HTML location. But how do I know this information, correct? How do I know that the file has to be copied it into where www HTML? Sometime back when I was using HTTPD image, then I go to the HTTPD image documentation. They will mention that, then I'll get that location information. I'll copy it. But now I'm taking Amazon Linux as a base, right? How do you know that this is the location where the code has to be copied? The Amazon Linux will not talk about, right? If I go to the Amazon Linux documentation, and this documentation will never talk about that HTTPD, because this image is carrying just a minimal OS. You are doing your own customizations on top of that. So it's really tricky sometimes to write a Docker file from scratch just like that by directly going to the Visual Studio Code. I always recommend, whenever you wanted to do some customizations to your images, you try to implement all those steps, commands in your native EC2 instance directly. I mean to say, take a Amazon Linux EC2 instance like this, right? Take a EC2 instance of Amazon Linux OS. Then you try to run all the commands. Whatever the commands that you are expecting to be in my Docker file, right? You try to run the commands in one of the testing sample EC2 instance running with your favorite operating system. Then you know that the exact command which will be working, correct? Once you know that this is the command which will be to do the customization configuration, then copy that command and put into your Docker file as one of the run layer, right? Of course, that means initially when you are trying to develop the Docker file, yes, this is how you need to do. You need to do all these manual steps. Once it is installed, what will be the default document root folder? You verify that, okay, once you confirm that this is how it is, copy that information and put it here. That is how we need to do a line by line, at least the first time when you are trying to compose this. If you are already familiar all this, yes, we can go on line, can write it, but I'm just giving you the approach, guys. Tomorrow you may get a different requirement, right? You can't go and write a Docker file just like that. You try to see how you can get that things done on a direct EC2 instances first, verify the steps, get the commands list ready, then you transform that it into a Docker file. Make sense? Now, I think I got my Amazon Linux and I just have installed my Apache web server that I wanted to be, and I installed a few other commands as well, just to show you how you can do the customization. Then I copied my code as well into the required target location, right? Now, am I done with this? No. Why? When you take Amazon Linux as a base OS, right? This base OS does not have any application to start automatically, correct? Now you need to tell that, hey, this is the application that has to be started automatically later when someone is creating a container from the image that I'm going to build. How to tell that information now? It's like a systemctl enable command, right? Usually we use in direct EC2 instances, correct? So similar thing can be done by using one other layer. Okay, you see here the CMD. The CMD is the instruction that will tell that specify the default commands that it has to run at the time of the container is turning into a running state, and I wanted to do this, and get the instructions or the syntax how we can do this CMD, and just go with this. What is the command that I wanted to run, guys? It will be systemctl start httpd, correct? So this is the command that I wanted to run to bring up my application, which will be listening on port number 80. But you can't give this systemctl command just like that to the CMD. There is a specific syntax that the CMD is expecting based on this documentation. How do I know that information now, right? So usually it will be like a kind of, the list format, right, having this uh, comma separated arguments. This is the general syntax. So we need to follow that like this, right? Then we need to see how we can put these commands here. But I would advise it's a little tricky to compose the command here, because you all know that the systemctl start httpd, right? But how we can put that command in the CMD accepted syntax format? I would advise you go and get it from the documentation itself and search for it. Get some references, right? Let's say a Docker file CMD for HTTPD start. The reason why I'm searching here, right, just to show you the approach, guys. Okay, no other reason. Let me go to Docker Hub one more time. So I'll just go and search for HTTPD one more time. So I'm just going for the HTTPD, guys, one other time, right? So let me choose one of the version. Sorry, the tag section. So this image is actually built by the Docker people already for you, correct? Correct. So when this image got built by the Docker people, and definitely the Docker might have been used a Docker file to build this image, correct? They might have been used some Docker file only to build this image for you, correct? So if you go to the existing some of the images and look into the tags and go to the specific tag that you wanted to, right? So this will give you the way how the Docker is actually created this image. This will definitely help you guys, okay? Now you see this image is actually created by the Docker people by having, this is the Docker file, you see, this is the Docker file. Now you get to know that how this image is got actually built, right? And you see all these instructions, run statement, env, right? So on, so on, so on, so on, all these things. And somewhere you see they are actually using the CMD and they are actually starting the services, right? It will help you to get more information, and sometimes these existing Docker layers will help you how to use the syntaxes, right, specific to your customization as well. Make sense, guys? And anyway, here this CMD will not help me much because this is actually Alpine Linux, and my case it is a Amazon Linux. So I just need a syntax, guys. Docker CMD for to start Apache. Okay, so here you can see some example here. It says that CMD, and it is saying that you need to use the command like this. It says that /usr/sbin/httpd and comma -d comma foreground. Sounds not good, right? How do I know that this is the syntax that we need to use to bring up the application? Why can't I use the command like systemctl start httpd? Got me? Right? Why it is not using systemctl start httpd? Why it is using this particular command? Yes, that is one tricky point to make a command how it has to be. So if we use systemctl start httpd, it won't work, guys. Okay, and even if you do a run statement here and give the command like this, it won't work. Sometime back I was using the run statement in order to execute my commands, right? Now also this is one of the command, systemctl is one of the command, but you should not use the run statement here. It should be a cmd and we need to follow the specific syntax. What will be the difference here between the run and the cmd, guys? In both cases my requirement is to give some specific command that it has to run, right? The difference here is the run statement will be get executed at the time of you are creating the image, but the cmd is a command that has to be executed later when you are running the container. That's the difference, right? Hence the command that you wanted to use to start the application, that should always be a cmd instruction. Now in order to get more information, you take the command, because you must be know how to bring up the applications on the direct EC2 instances, right? Like this is the way how you can bring up the application when you are running directly on the EC2 instances, right? So you run the command something like this and you try to see the way how it is running in. Sorry. I'm just running the ps-ef command, guys, just to see, right, how my Apache web server is actually running on the direct EC2 instances. Here you get to see that your whenever you run systemctl start command, right, it is actually running the command like this. You see this? It is actually running as usr has been httpd, that is the actual daemon which is running -d, and the foreground is the flag. So this is the one, right? So you are actually using this particular command in your run statement here. Put that into a list format. The first instruction will be in a quote mark, comma, then the d flag, comma, then the foreground. Is it matching to what I got it from documentation? While I'm spending some time, I'm trying to give you the process how to get the CMD that you need to use in your Docker file, guys. This command will not work. And it's all case to case basis. Sometimes your command may work. It's all based on the application type as well. We need to do some little back and forth to see how to make the application up and which will be the syntax to use in your Docker file. Now let me come here. You will get to know the difference between run and CMD in a while once I start executing this thing. Now I think so my Docker file is ready. Let me try this. I'll copy this Docker file. I'll go to my server because I don't have Docker installed in my local system. I'll just keep my code here. Good. Now let me save this file. Let me cat the Docker file one more time. Now let me execute the command. Docker build -t, let's say docker.io /dpt hub/ Docker images. Okay, let me use the same name, guys. Docker build -t, specify the image name colon. Sometime back I have created a image, right? That was 1.0 version. That means what? The first time when you created, that was having the Alpine Linux minimal OS, right? Now I'm creating a one more image, right? But this is also Apache HTTP web server only. This time I'll use it as, let's say, a 2.0. Getting me? I would like to show you what does it mean by the tagging. So the image name is same, but the tag is getting different now. The 1.0 tag will give you the Alpine Linux minimal OS. The 2.0 tag will give you the Amazon Linux OS. Getting me, guys? The image name is same pretty much because both are pretty much giving you the Apache web server only, right? That's the reason the image name is same, but I'm just differentiating using the tagging here. Each time when you build a new image, you increment the tag number. That way, every tag will contain a specific instructions or specific customizations. Let me hit enter. That's okay. It is complaining a error that on line number 4 there is a problem. So I just use the syntax like this. Let me see. Multi-line run statement in Docker file. Okay, so I just have missed this backslash over there. So let me give that. That is the syntax. I don't need it here because that is the last command that I wanted to. Let me copy this now. I'll go back to my server again. Let me remove this existing code, keep my latest one, remove the empty lines. Now let me run the command one more time. So it is actually started running these layers. So you see that it is actually running the yum install command to install the HTTP packages. Then it will install the VA editor. Then it will install the few other things. Right after that, it is actually copying the code, and then you see that the image is ready. I wanted to point out that after the copy operation, right? If you look into your code, after the copy operation, there is a CMD line, right? Why the CMD is not getting executed here? Correct? It is actually executing a line by line, right? The CMD is not executing here. Why? Whatever you given in the CMD instruction, that is not intended for executing it now, correct? That will be executed later when the container will go into a running state, correct? So it will just configure that whatever is given in the CMD, that is the command to start automatically later time, but not now. That's the difference between run and the CMD. Are we good with that? The run will be executed right away to customize your image, but the CMD will be executed later when you are actually using this image and running the container. Right now you see that the image is created with a tag called 2.0, and I have 1.0 and I have 2.0 as well, right? So now let me run a container out of it. Docker run hyphen name. This is my web container as a detached mode, correct? And specify the image name colon, specify the tag as well, which image that you wanted to use. Let me hit enter. If you do docker ps to see the containers that are currently running, now interestingly you see that under the command section, it is showing you that it is actually running the CMD that you given at the time of building the image, and this command is being executed, and that's the reason the Apache web server is started inside a container. And as this application is in running state, right, you see that your application is actually in running state. It is not getting terminated, right? The 2.0 tag will give you the Amazon Linux, right? Because that is the tag that I given at the time of building the image. The image name can be same, but the different tags will give you the different customizations when you are keep on doing some changes, right? So if I go inside this container, let's say Docker exec as an interactive mode to the bash shell, right? I'm inside a container now. I just wanted to show you that slash logs. You see guys, the slash logs folder got created. Why? I given the mkdir command in the Docker file, right? So it is actually created a folder for you, right? Let me see the VI. You see that the VI is also working here. Probably the VI might be not available by default when you get the base OS. I made some customization by installing them. That's how we need to tweak your Docker file, how you are expecting the new image to be. Let me exit from there. Let me clear the screen. When you look into the Docker file, the order is very important. In which order you are giving the instructions, the Docker build process will be executing in the same order, right? So definitely first you need to get the base image from the Docker Hub registry, then you install your applications and packages, then copy the code, then start the service. This is the order, right? Let's say if you put the first line in the last, it won't work because first it is trying to install where it will be installing, correct? So try to maintain the same order how the Docker has to execute them. If I come to the Docker file, now it's all about understanding the Docker file instructions, guys, right? So we just seen cmd copy from, right? Let me see this expose. Expose is the instruction which will be telling that which port that the application is currently listening on. I mean to say, let's say you have written a Docker file, right? And you give this Docker file to your colleague as an example. How would he know that this application is listening on which port number, correct? Because now this is installing with Apache HTTPD web server, we know that the default port number is 80. But tomorrow it could be any application, right? How would the people will know that this is running on which port number? So just to make it more readability, we can add another instruction saying that which port that the application is running inside a container. That is what is the expose, but it is optional. If you make it, it's more readability to understand or else no.
So I have a question, sir.
Yes, please.
Uh, so you just copied that index.html, right? So as the next step, so are we going to check what is there by accessing it through the web with the port number 80?
Okay, so let me see there and Docker PS. So at the time of me running the container, since I did not done the port mapping, right? So let me stop it because I can't do the port mapping now, right? Once it is in running state. So that's the reason I'm actually removing this container. I will create a container again, right? I'm running the container again. Sorry, again I forgot to give that. Stop the container, container ID, docker rm, remove the container. Now let me run the container one more time. This time I'm actually giving -p flag and do a 8080. So why the 80 is in use? Can you get this error, guys? It is complaining that, hey, the port number 80 already in use. Where it is in use? It is telling that the port number 80 is in use in your EC2 instance level or in the host machine level. Why? Remember, sometime back when I was trying to do some experiment, I have actually installed it on my EC2 server itself, right? The web server. That is where the web server is actually listening on port number 80. Let me do this. Systemctl stop HTTPD. I don't want it to be there. Now let me run it one more time. Docker PS, right? So yes, this looks good. I'll just go back to my EC2 instance. Right, I just have created my custom image based on Amazon Linux image. Now I'm running the application inside a container. I'm just trying to access the application now. Copy this IP address and go to the browser. Before that, I need to add a security group rules. Let me allow the port number 80. Now let me try to access the application by pointing the request to the EC2 server IP on port number 80. Now you see that your website is running as expected. This is my code. So this is the line that I given in my index.html, right? At the time of me copying this file into my new image, and it is working. Now let me clear the screen. Now anyway, I'm here, right? Like somehow I customized my image using the Docker file, and the image is created. I deployed. Now it is running, right? And the people are accessing the website. Now a question for you at this time. When the website is being accessed, right? It is going to create a dynamic content sometimes, correct? When I say dynamic content, in the sense, whenever the users are accessing your application, that time it may create a dynamic content automatically just to support your business behavior. Some example. Once the, of course, this is a dummy website for now. Let's say there is a real website where it is giving you a login option, sign up option. Okay, then you go and sign up the account by giving your email ID, password, all these things. That information should be get saved somewhere, right? On example, the second example, let's say this is a website like a youtube.com as an example. Someone will go to the website and try to upload a video. That video will be transferred. The video has to be stored somewhere. Do you think you store all of that data? That means in single word, I would say the dynamic data that is getting created when the people are accessing the web application, that dynamic data you would like to store in your container itself, because this is the container where my application is running, right? So whenever it is generating some dynamic data, right, of course by default it is going to store that dynamic data in the container itself. That is true. But if you are storing the dynamic data in the container itself, right, tomorrow if this container get crashes, terminated, of course you can create a new container from the image, but do you think the image will have the dynamic data that is getting created as part of the business? No, right? Just for this particular real scenario, let's say when someone is accessing this website, definitely your Apache is going to create logs, correct? Some logs will be generated, right, whenever someone is accessing the website. Let me see the logs. I'll go to Docker exec. I'll just go to the container and I'll just go there. What will be the location, guys? The logs will be interesting. The clear command itself is not working in this because this is a minimal OS, right? If you want it to be, again, you install the package corresponding, which will be giving you the clear command, it seems. Okay, that's okay. You see, so under var log httpd location, and you can see that the access log and the error logs are there. These files are keep on updating when someone is accessing the website, correct? If you see the access underscore log, and it is actually, having some information there, right? So the point which I'm making, right, when application is running and someone is using the application, it may create some dynamic content sometimes. That content you should not store within the container itself, because if the container gets terminated, you will lose the data as well, because that dynamic data will not be there in the image. So in that situation, as much as possible, you keep the data outside of the container. I think earlier as well, we did the same kind of a best practice, right? When my application is running on the EC2 instances, better not to keep the data in the server itself. You always keep it outside of the server. Then we have introduced something called S3 buckets. You keep the data in the S3 bucket or somewhere else. But all the data cannot go to S3, right? Sometimes the data can go to S3, which is in the form of a file format. Some data cannot go to S3 as well. So in order to ensure that the data is being stored outside of the container, we need to use the concept called volume mounting. Let's say in this particular situation, the data that is getting created in the specific location, right? That data I wanted to store outside of the container, not inside the container. So I think the actual location will be like this, guys. etc httpd and then the logs folder. So this is the actual location where the log files are getting created. Okay, now this should be outside of the container. How I can do that? Let me clear the screen. Docker ps. Let me terminate this for now, because each time when I'm trying to do some changes, right, I can't do that on the running container. That's the reason I'm going to stop it, remove it. Now what I do is, in my base machine, in the host machine, I'm going to create a folder. Let's say I wanted to keep my logs in the host machine itself. Okay, in the host machine, I'm creating a folder called logs. Now I'm going to run a container. What was the location, guys? /etc/hdpd/logs, I believe, right? That's it. What I'm doing now. -v is a flag which says that the volume mounting, that means in the host machine side, the /logs folder will be now get mapped or mounted into this particular folder inside a container. Then whatever the data that is getting added to this particular folder in your container, all the data will now actually come to this particular folder in your host machine side. Then tomorrow, if your container gets crashed, deleted for any reason, the data that is getting created in this folder, right? That data you can still you can still access it in the /logs folder, which is in your OS level itself. I meant to say, which is outside of the container, which is in your host machine itself. Getting me? Now I just have created a logs folder sometime back, right? Now let me see what is there in the logs folder. You see, I just have created a folder just like that. And now I see that under the logs folder, I can see the 2 files that are added. How come these files are came in? Because when the container is actually in a running state, right, the actual logs files are there in this folder. That data is actually, uh, mapped into this particular logs folder, which is outside of the container. So now if someone is accessing the website, the data will be get updated into this location, and all that data is actually in your logs folder, which is outside of the container, right? So if my container get crashed, you don't see any data loss because that is available in this particular folder, which is outside anyway. It could be a log data, could be any other, guys, but I'm taking log as an example. But in general, think that if any dynamic data is getting created by your application, you use that as an external volume, not inside the same container. Are we good with that statement?
So I have a question, sir. This this logs that you're mapping, the volume mount that you're doing from the container to the actual physical volume, can we also customize this into the Docker file, or no? We have to do it during the Docker run command only.
It has to be during the Docker run only. You can't do the changes to this volume of mounting once it is in running state.
Okay. Thank you.
So we can stop the container, rewrite our code, and put all this, and then we can do it, sir. Is it possible?
Yes, obviously, right? So once you run the container, right, it will prepare all the container specific configuration. So then you can stop it and can start it. It will be still intacted, this particular volume mount, all these things.
No. What I meant is in the image itself, can we put all these commands, stop it, and re-import the image? Can we do
You
that?
should not.
No.
No,
Okay. Thank you.
not really, because the port mapping that I'm doing, of course, it is a good question. The port mapping that I'm doing and the volume mounting that I'm doing are not part of the image creation. These two will not go in your Docker file. If you are keeping that in a Docker file, right, it will be like a copy command where you copy the files to inside a image. That can be done, but you can't say that, right? It has to be a volume mounting later once the image is used to run as a container. No, that cannot go into this, but we can copy the files if you want to, but that doesn't mean that the files are getting updated to local, right? That the purpose itself is different. Now, if for any reason, if my container gets stopped, let's say the container is actually terminated, you still see your data because the data is actually, right, mapped to your external volumes, not inside a container. So far so good, right? I'm just giving more scenarios. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show. Usually your Docker container ID will be almost 64 character length like this. When you do Docker PS, you will get to see only the short ID. It's up to you. You wanted to use this lengthy ID or you use the short ID. Both are same, right? So when you use this starting 4 characters or 6 characters, it will automatically understand that what will be the actual, container ID. Now, Docker logs is the command to see the logs of a container, guys. Let's say if you wanted to see the logs of this application, right? You don't need to go inside a container, go to the log folder, see the logs there, not required, right? The Docker logs command will automatically give you the logs of your application that is currently running in. But both will be little different. The Docker logs will give you the application logs only, which are exported to the Docker level. But the logs that you see inside a container in the specific folder, more or less the logs will be the same, but sometimes may not be. So this is one command which will help you to see the logs and do the troubleshooting, all these things. Docker inspect is the another command which will tell you the container characteristics, how the container is got created, all the properties of the container, all the information you can get it using the inspect command. The inspect output is a big, kind of a list with the dictionary format. This will tell you that how the container got created, like container ID, when that got created, right? And you see that which command is getting executed automatically when you bring up the container status, the image that it is using to run the container. Interestingly, now you see that the var lib docker is the folder where it is actually containing the information about the container, and you see some location here. Docker will use this folder automatically to keep this container information. I'll show that in a while. But if you do little scroll down, the one which I wanted to show is this one. And there is a concept called volume mounting. In the volume mounting, if you see the syntax, it is clearly telling that /logs folder in your base machine is getting mounted into this particular destination in your container, right? It is currently mounted, and that's the reason it is under the mount section. And currently it is a read and write mode. That means the container can read the data, can write the data it into this location. If you do little scroll down, you will see that yeah, this is the port mappings. This is what I'm trying to, you see, your container is actually having a IP address, guys. 172.17.0.2 is the IP that is assigned for your container. By default, the container IP addresses will be in the range of 172.17 series. That's the default everywhere. And you get some IP in that range, and you see the container IP. This container IP is the private IP which cannot be accessible from outside of your container network. Even this IP will not be accessible from your host machine also in general or by default. If your container IP is not accessible from outside of your container network or not from your outside of your EC2 server, then what is the use of using this IP address, guys? Why this IP address is configured at first point to your container? Are we using this IP for any purpose to access my application? No, right? I didn't use this IP at all. I actually use the EC2 server IP, which is the host machine IP, and do the port forwarding and all. I'm able to access the application from outside world as well. But why these IP addresses are there? Every container will have the IP configured. That IP will be used by the Docker internal purpose. We are not using the Docker containers IPs for any of the use cases. You will never ever use the IP for any purpose, but that is being used by the Docker internally for some kind of a communication. For now, the statement is you will never use the container IP for any reason directly. That is for internal purpose. Yes, the Docker engine will be using this IP address for identifying the container. You will not use this. If you want to use the container, you always use the name of the container only. Either you use the container ID or you use the container name, right? That's how you will be identifying the container. Let's say whenever you use the container name, how would the Docker engine know that what is the corresponding container if it has to do a connectivity, any other things? So when it comes to the networking layer, it know what needs to be done and how to resolute this name to a IP, all these things. We will not use a IP addresses for any use case. This container IP will be keep changing every time when you create a new container. If you stop it and create a new container, there is a chance that it may get a one more new IP as well. That's the reason, as the IP addresses are keep on changing when the new container is getting created, we will not be relying on the IP addresses. We will follow our container naming standard only. You take care of which name that you wanted to write each time when you are creating the container.
Does it have any internal DNS name or not?
Yes, it will be having.
Okay.
Are we good with this? So I think this is good enough for today, at least, guys. Right, we'll talk more in next lectures. Right.
So there,
Go ahead, please.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So there is a command called docker info, and this is docker inspect.
Docker
So,
info is, of course, I'm done for the today. I'm just going through the questionnaire, guys. And Docker info is all about giving you the Docker engine related information, which Docker version is installed, right? You see total how many containers are there, how many are in running state, how many are in stop state, how many images are there in this Docker server. Pretty much this is all talking about the overall summary of your Docker engine as a software, right? The Docker inspect is very
statistics.
specific to the container, right?
Yes, basically it's statistics.
It's not a statistics, that's not a right terminology. I would say this is the characteristics, right? These are the Docker engine characteristics. Docker inspect is the container start characteristics, right? That's the insight about Docker, guys. I hope you will like this scenarios, and we'll talk more in the next lecture too.
Hi PR, Surishma this side.
Yes.
Here we're using the mounting concept where we mount the logs and then we collect the dynamic web page data. So as we have did mounting for our servers, we need to mount it every time we get into the server. So is it the same scenario for container, even like every time it gets restarted or something like that, it should be mounted again to that path?
Yes, it has to be. So that means that's true. Whenever your container gets stopped for any reason, right? And when you are trying to run it again, yes, it has to be mounted every time.
So what if it gets restarted automatically by the system? Like we have few commands where it gets restarted automatically.
Right? So the Docker restart will not cause any impact, right? Because your configuration is still intact. So the Docker restart will just try to refresh your application inside a container. It is not getting recreated. If you see here, the create time is still 10 minutes ago,
Yes.
right? But the status says up 3 seconds ago. When you are restarting a container, it actually restarts the application inside a container, but your container is still there. One thing. The second thing, when you stop the container, when you stop the container, then you can start the container again. Docker start. So you don't need to tell again that it has to be mounted on the /logs folder. No, because the container is still created. It is there, right? And it is storing the configuration. Only the reason why you need to re-specify or where it has to be get mounted is if your container gets terminated. When you are creating a container again as a fresh using the same image, then again you need to tell all these specifications, which port has to be mapped, which volume has to be mounted, all these things.
Yeah, then it gets completely the new container. It's no more the older one.
Obviously, right? So
yes.
That's true. But there is no loss for me. Either it is a old container or a new container, because the container is getting created from the same image, so that the application will be the same, code will be the same, and it is mounting on the same directory where it left off previous container, so it will be accessing the same data that was generated sometime back too, right?
Yeah.
So that's how your business will continue to be operated, though your container gets terminated and you create a new container as well. There will be no glitch from the business side of world. It can continue to run.
Okay. And one more thing, only we can have one dynamic web page for a container. Because only the specific path gets mounted. If we have two dynamic, then we can't mount the same thing to the other container.
So obviously, right, there is no use that the same logs folder has to be mounted in another container. If you have two containers, you try to take two different volumes that you wanted to mount. Why would you take one volume mounted on two different containers, right?
So it becomes the other EC2 server.
As of now, I'm limited to the container in a one server only. What is the scenario if we are going for multiple EC2 instances? We'll talk later, right? So for now, it is one single server where I'm running a container, right? If you have two EC2 instances and you are expecting the containers are running there and there, so that will be altogether a different story. Kubernetes will come into the picture there.
Okay, so in our scenario, we can have only one dynamic container, as we are using only one EC2 instance.
Not really, right? You can create how many containers that you wanted to. For example, you run the command again, you create a one more container. I created a multiple containers previously, right? Let's say you
But it
create a one.
can have the static web page. We can't keep the dynamic one in that.
So what is the difference between static and the dynamic there?
So, like as we discussed till now, like when we put some data in that, we cannot store it in a container, because one of the reasons is it also becomes heavier, the container. We cannot store it inside a container all the time. If the data loss will be there.
Right. So each time when you are running the container, you specify that the container has to be get mounted to which folder. And that's where your data will be outside of the container. So let's say you run one container, you specify how you are expecting the volume mounting to be. You run another container, you specify how your volume mounting to be. You run one more container, you specify how volume mounting to be. So you can run any number of containers that you wanted to, and specify how each container should be storing the data in which locations or
Okay, so
in
we
which
use
external
different
volumes.
locations.
Yes, obviously.
Okay. Uh, mm, okay, and one more thing. Here we are for dynamic web pages, we are using the mounting part. Like it is not like how should like we are not using the container for the dynamic web pages. We are using the server for that one. So here, like container will not serve the major purpose of what we are using, like serving the application. Like here, containers are usually for keeping the independent applications. Like one application will not be in contact of other application. But here, if we are keeping the data outside of container, then the purpose of container is not fulfilled, I mean.
Okay, so let me do one more thing. Yeah, while I'm doing this, right, of course, whoever want to drop off can drop off. I'm just continue this discussion, right? So this is my EC2 server, which is currently in 1D availability zone. What I do is I'll just go to volume section there. I'll just go and create a volume there, and this is 4 GB in size. I wanted it to be in 1D zone, and let me create a new volume. I'll just use this volume, and I will be attaching this volume to my server. This is gonna be real time now, right? So I'll just attach this to my server, right? Like that, I can create multiple volumes. So I got my volume here. Now what I do is mkfs hyphen text4/dev/ the volume. Now what I do is I'll create slash web data. What I do is mount /dev/ the volume in /web data. Now /web data is the folder that is where it is mounted on a xvdf volume. Now what I do is I'll do Docker images. I'll take the image that I wanted to run my application. Docker run, right? Docker run, and I would say Docker run hyphen name, my application name, whatever it is, the container name, hyphen D as a detached mode, hyphen P for port mapping, let's say some other port, just to avoid the conflict, right? And hyphen V is a volume mounting. Now I will say that the /web data has to be get mounted on, let's say /data in the container side. And this is the image that it has to use to run the container with the 2.0 version. What will happen when you do this? The container is actually running an application independently without having any conflict with any other containers, without having any OS level dependency with your host machine as well. The data that it is dynamically generating or the data it is trying to use, the data is actually coming from the /web data, which is actually a separate volume that I created for my application purpose. Now, if you look through here, do you think is there any dependency to your host machine?
No.
No. Tomorrow, for any reason, if your host machine gets destroyed, terminated, let's say, there is no loss for me. My volume is still there. My image is still there. The image will carry whatever is needed to run the application. The data, whatever it needed, is already there in this volume. You try to map them and mount it, deploy as a container wherever you want it to. You just need the volume, of course, in this case, because I have a volume dependency. So that's how it works. That means the containers are not having any dependency from the configuration perspective. That is what is more important. It has its own data mapped, that is fine, but is it dependent on the configuration? When I say configuration, is it depending on the HTTP versions? Is it depending on
No.
the OS level configuration? Is it conflicting with any of the other packages that are installed in the OS? No, it's
No.
not at all depending on any OS level configuration. It doesn't care about your host machine is Amazon Linux, your host machine is Ubuntu, your host machine is something else. It can be any with any configuration. As long as my container is running, it is good. It just needs its own data.
Okay. So container just fulfills that there is no application configuration inconsistency.
Obviously, that's true.
Okay. So in real time, most of the web pages will be dynamic. So we'll be using this type of methodology. Maybe in later classes, we'll be improvising it. As of
Exactly.
now, it will be like this in the real time.
Exactly. Wherever you see that the data has to be stored outside of the container because you may feel the data should be secure, then you follow this approach.
Okay. And one more thing, using Dockerfile we will not use the containerization. It is just for the purpose of customized images, right? Dockerfile.
Exactly. Exactly. The Docker
Okay.
file is just a kind of a scripting file which will just help us to create a new images out of it.
If we relate this to our previous concepts, it is just like a user data in launch template.
Not really. Not really. This is like a AMI of your previous discussions. Using the AMI, you can create a one other EC2 instance that you like to with a predefined set of softwares, right? I'm doing the same here. Using the Docker image, I'm going to create a container which is a preset of softwares that I wanted to. Not a like this Docker image I can compare with the golden AMI, not with the user data. What is user data? The line number 8 is called as a user data. The line number 8 is what it is being executed automatically when later you are running the container like a user data.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I get it. It's clear. Um, yeah, and one more thing, in the tags we are giving a 2.0 and 1.0 versioning for Amazon Linux. Can we add tag something like Amazon Linux? Because if we have 3 or 4, we get confused which one is Amazon Linux, which one is the other one actually.
It's up to you. What is that you wanted to use as a tag? There is no specific rule over there.
Okay, it need not be the version all the time. It is our wish which we want to give.
Docker build and I wanted to build a image and let's say the image name, and after the colon the version can be anything that you like it. It doesn't worry about it. It will just take that as a identification wording, that's it. But it can be
Okay.
anything that you like it. But if you strictly look at the best practices, right, all what you need to worry about is the image name. The image name will tell you what kind of the image it is, what will be there inside the image, right? That then you follow the tag as 1.0, 2.0 if you look at the real time. In the real time, the people will go for right 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 image, right? The name will tell you what kind of the image it is, right? But yeah,
Oh,
for your convenience, yes, if you wanted to go with any other, yes, you can go, doesn't matter.
okay. And in the Docker file, we are giving mkdir that we are creating the directory. So it creates the directory in the image, and when the container is created, it just extracts the data, like all
Exactly,
the directories and everything.
exactly.
Okay. Uh, yeah, these are the dots which I had for today's class. Do we cover AWS CloudFormation templates?
No,
Okay. Like, is it not used in the real time or?
it's not needed. Being said that we have Terraform in place. The
Yeah.
Terraform and CloudFormation both are for the same purpose, right? Since we know the Terraform how to handle the AWS infrastructure, which is more popular, widely used infrastructure as a code, right? So the cloud formation is least used. So no one is actually expecting the cloud formation skill, especially if you have a Terraform skill with you.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your extended support.
Thank you.
Hi sir, Kanchan here.
Yes.
Have a doubt. So as we know that the container engine shares the host OS, CPU, uh, and memory and processor. So apart from that, does the container has its own memory?
No. Right? How would the container will have its own memory? Whatever is given by the Docker engine, that is the memory that is being given to the container, and the container will use the same.
Okay. So if that is the case, then when we need to mount the containers folder to, to the volume, root volume of EC2.
So I think to the okay, to the memory that you have been talking about and the mounting that you are talking about, both are two different things altogether, right? This volume mounting is about storing the data, not for this is not related to the processor and the memory, right? This is about the storage, the hard drive, correct? This is about the hard drive. Like by default, your Docker engine will give the processor and the memory to the container to run the application on all these things, right? But what about the hard disk? Let's say my container need a hard disk to store the data. Where do you get that? If it is a EC2 server, right? What do? You take the volume, you attach the volume to the EC2 server, mount it and use it. If your application is running inside a container, how would you give the volume to the container? How would you attach a hard disk to the container, right? That is what I'm doing here. So you are actually attaching a volume to the EC2 server. You mount it as a file system. That is what you are now again you mounting it into inside a container. This is the process of, right, giving the storage facility to the container.
Okay. So if not do it explicitly, then it will be on root volume, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If you are not doing that explicitly, I think that is one I talked about high level only, but yeah, usually in the varlib docker location, right? Here you can see somewhere called overlay 2, right? So this is where it will use some data. Of course, it will go to the root file system only, but this is the location where it is going to create some internal metadata kind of directory structure. It will use this directories to store your container specific data, all these things. But this is the temporary data. Once your container gets terminated, this data will be get wiped off. If you do the volume mount explicitly, then that data will not be wiped off. But any data that by default storing, that data will be wiped off.
But if container got destroyed, the data which we have taken through container that will be in the host, root volume. Is it so?
No. If you are explicitly mounting the volume like this, if you are mounting the volume explicitly like this, then only you can see the data in this specific volume that you mentioned. If you are not doing this explicit, then whatever the data that is stored in the container, that data will be get cleaned up once the container gets terminated.
Okay. Even though it is in the root volume, it gets,
Yes, it will get cleaned up because Docker engine will ensure that the moment when the
okay.
container gets terminated, why it has to keep the
Okay.
container specific information. It will go and
Oh,
clean up everything.
okay. So the memory allocated for particular container will be cleared up by the Docker engine.
It's not memory, it is a storage. Both are two different meanings
Okay.
altogether. Memory is equivalent to RAM.
Mm.
The storage is equivalent to the hard drive.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting, guys. I think thanks for your time.